Welcome to EnTrench, a 21 Pilots podcast. Hello, local dreamers. Welcome to EnTrench. My name is Annah, and this is episode 60, Polarize. Make sure you've listened to the song beforehand and are ready for an in-depth analysis of track 9 off Blurry Face. Today, I'm analyzing Polarize with my new friend, Caleb. Welcome to the podcast, Caleb. How are you doing?
Doing good. Glad to be here.
Good. We are glad to have you. Me and Caleb are listening to one another's bodiless voices today. Just because it's like 2024, any predictions on like when you think the album will happen or anything?
The next one, I have no clue. It's so sporadic, and I haven't really dug into it. It's just the kind of thing that it feels inevitable, but you never know when it's going to come. So, just waiting patiently.
Yeah. I feel like I don't know if they'll like drop another hint beforehand. I feel like we're kind of waiting for the precursors still. So.
Yeah.
I just like seeing if people have any predictions or anything. But
I'm not a gambling man, so I couldn't tell you.
That's fair. So, since this is your first podcast, I wanted to run through the introduction questions. So firstly, if you want to talk about like what your personal story with the band is, and also your listener story and how you found the podcast.
So personal story with the band. I think the sort of main story that I remember is when I was first introduced to the band back in 2015, it sort of encapsulated this sort of era of my life that was really sort of difficult. How old was I in 2015? I need to do math. Like 12, maybe?
That's
so I was
scary.
young.
That's like almost 10 years ago.
Yeah, I was a young kid with, dealing with school and just life in general. And it sort of solidified that part of my life with music that from people who understood the same struggles. I mean, that's kind of what Blurry Face is about, is understanding those struggles. And so just getting introduced to the band is probably one of the biggest memories that I have. In terms of when I found the podcast, I don't exactly remember the circumstances of when I stumbled upon it. I don't know if can't remember if I was actively looking for like a song analysis podcast. I might have been. I just remember I was listening to the first or some of the older episodes while I was at work, and then it just sort of threw my head for a spiral trying. I was like, oh wow, these are way more meaningful than I thought they were.
Oh really? Just like the layers or...
Yeah, I mean, I've kind of always understood that there's a lot of meaning behind 21 Pilots music, just in general. But like the layers upon layers, I don't do very much analysis beyond maybe a couple layers in, but
that's okay too.
Yeah, the level of detail that you do here is really quite something.
Well, thank you. My hope is that I can like help show people how many ways they can connect with the song in a way, I guess.
Yeah. And I think there's a second part to that podcast story. I listened to it, and then I listened to an episode, and then almost immediately after, I think that afternoon, I went and did some like housework with a friend. We were painting and like cleaning windows and that kind of stuff. And I told him about the podcast, and we just talked about 21 Pilots for like a good couple hours.
I love that.
Yeah, so it's sort of...
Is this someone you've known loves the band for a long time?
Oh, yeah. I've known this guy since 6th grade. And he's just as big of a fan of the band as I am. And we talk about, like, the meaning behind the songs, like, what are they going through, especially Tyler, like, what's going through his head when he's singing.
Mm-hmm.
And so it sort of spurred on good conversation about the band that we don't really get to have very much.
Mm-hmm. That's really encouraging. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, I feel like if I can create more conversation, that's exactly what I want. So that's cool. What, if any, is your favorite album?
I have to say, Trench is hands down my
Nice.
favorite.
That's the only option. I'm just kidding.
Um,
Any particular reason?
I don't know. It has got to have some of the most unique sounding music that I've heard, and also the whole aesthetic of the album. I really
Mm-hmm.
liked it. It was sort of grungy and dirty. Like all the promotional artwork was sort of grungy, and the music wasn't very like clean cut,
Yeah, I
and
know what you mean.
it was sort of all over the place. And I was especially like captured by the world of Dima that he created,
Mm-hmm.
and the whole like lore, I guess, that
Yeah.
really I could really sink my teeth into it trying to figure out what's going on.
Yeah, I feel like I need to freshen myself up with all the lore to like fully explain it to everyone. I feel like I'm rusty.
Yeah. Um, I'm sort of familiar with the lore they establish within Trench, but I've heard that it like goes all the way back to Blurryface and even continues into Scaled and Icy, and that territory is something that I'm not very familiar with at all.
Do you have a favorite song? That's probably really different.
Yeah, it is. It's I could narrow it down to two. I think I'm either gonna have to go with My Blood or I think Nico and the Niners.
Nice. Those are both great songs. I'm very biased.
What's your favorite song or top two or three? Because it's hard to pick one.
You know, I don't know if I've thought about that much. Like, I usually will think about like per album, but I feel like one I come back to the most is probably Migraine.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a great
Um,
one.
yeah, especially in terms of like spiritual warfare and everything. I think I connect with that a lot. But I also have gone and leaned into My Blood a lot as well for similar reasons. So
Yeah, the My Blood music video is
I
probably
love the
the
music.
best video I've ever watched. It it's like you watch a whole movie in 4 minutes.
And
It's
you watch
crazy.
it and you're like, I have to watch it again.
I know, and the ending gets me every time. It
Yeah.
does. That it's got to be some of the best like short film making I've seen.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm really excited to talk about both of those. How does a band inspire you, or do they represent anything for you?
Well, like I mentioned earlier with the personal story, each sort of album or even just individual songs sort of capture memories or like certain eras of my life, regardless of, if that's a set of, a few years, like a grade level at school, or just a couple months where I was in a particular mood for a short time. So and then I can go back and listen to those albums and songs and not relive the memories, but,
Hmm.
remember what that period of time was like.
Yeah, I resonate with that as well.
So, and some songs like remind me of certain people who either that's their favorite song from the band or just from what I know of their personal struggles, that song in particular connects with their personal struggles.
Hmm.
So I've sort of used the band as more than anything else a time capsule.
Yeah, that's awesome. I feel like that's also the power of music in general.
Yeah.
And then, do you have any favorite Tony Pilots memories?
Yeah, one of my favorite memories, I mean, that took place while I was like listening to the music. I think I was listening to Trench. I think I was listening to like Jumpsuit, Levitate, and Nico and the Niners on like SoundCloud when those tracks were first dropped before the album came out. I was
Mm-hmm.
listening to them like sitting in my room, and I think I was just like sort of daydreaming stories and characters that sort of fit the themes of those three songs, talking about, being in a strange place. You don't understand what's really happening to you. You're trying to find a way out, but you don't know how.
Yeah.
And it's a very fond memory because some of my I generally consider myself a creative person, and so those stories and characters that came out of that headspace listening to that music are some of my most beloved personal keepsakes that I have in my head.
That's so cool. And now that's like another memory on top, kind of.
Yeah, another thing to fit in the 21 Pilots time capsule.
Mm-hmm.
I can always go back to I could go back to a particular album and have a whole range of memories, or like especially for their older music, I've never really done like a full album listen of self-titled or Vessel.
Really?
Yeah.
It's a great experience. Highly
I
recommend.
yeah, my friend who really I think he enjoys some of their older music far more than their newer stuff is like, dude, you
Mm-hmm.
gotta listen to self-titled and Vessel all the way through.
I mean, I agree.
It's on the it's something that I gotta do, but then there's tracks like some older ones from like No Fun Intended or Regional at Best
Mm-hmm.
that I've listened to, and those like just one song can capture a particular time. So it's on an album and a per song basis, which is interesting to me.
Mm-hmm. I feel like I also think of like where Tyler and Josh were at different points throughout all of these albums too, which is also like a different time capsule.
I'm gonna be honest, like I haven't really tracked their personal lives very much, like not really something that I've been interested in. Not because I don't think that their journeys aren't important, but what I've learned generally is that if you want to, I try to separate the creator from the creation, because I've like dug in on some like musical artists that I listen to, and I'm like, oh, that they're just a bad person, and now you sort of it ruins the experience
Yeah.
of the music. And I'm not saying that that is any and like and in any way the case for 21 Pilots, but I think Tyler's music is special to him for reasons that are different than mine. Like
Mm-hmm.
his music is special to
For
me
sure.
for so I don't know. I just don't want like cross cross contamination. I don't know how else to describe it
That's completely valid for sure. But yeah, any last thoughts before we dig into the song?
other than I hope my notes are adequate.
I'm sure it'll be great. So today we're talking about Polarize, which is a very great song. I feel like personally it was never like one of the ones I reached for first on the album, but I really liked analyzing it, and I feel like this is one of those times for me where getting to really stop and slow down with this song brings a lot more meaning out of it for me.
Yeah, I
I
would.
don't know about you.
No, I agree. I've been listening to this song for years, and I always sort of got this. I don't know. It always made me think of Peter, the disciple. Like it sort of
Mhm.
matched, not it sort of conformed to his journey throughout the New Testament in his life with Jesus. And I think, the themes of denial, and then there's the
Mhm.
weird like rooster crowing noise that plays later in the song.
Wait,
Sort
what
of
point is that? I can't
uh
remember.
it's during the Domingo and Fuego portions. I
Okay.
think I lost my halo. I don't know where it plays sort of in the background, I think.
I'll have to re-listen to that. I'm sure you've listened to it more times than I have, so that's also why I'm happy you're here. Okay, so background, just like one fun fact, Polarize was recorded in Tarzana, which is a suburb of Los Angeles, and it was produced by Mike Elizondo. So let's dig into the song. So we start with the chorus, actually. and he says, help me polarize, help me polarize, help me down. Those stairs is where I'll be hiding all my problems. And then he repeats. And then he says, my friends and I, we got a lot of problems. Any initial reactions?
So one of the first things that I did when I started taking notes was I looked up the definition of polarize because I think that's a very important, it's the name of the song. And would you mind if I just read the definition?
Not at all. I also did this.
So, definition of polarize is to divide or cause to divide into two sharply contrasting groups or sets of opinions and beliefs. So, sort of like going to the extremes of any spectrum, I would say.
Yeah. I also wrote down the other definition was to restrict vibrations or light waves to one direction, which I feel like is kind of a spiritual analogy. Like to aim all of the light at blurry face or Satan, if we want to compare the two.
I saw that when I did the Google for the definition. I saw that definition and it was related more to physics, and I sort of grabbed the more literary definition, but I think both are valid. Yeah. They both kind of restricting to a particular axis or to extremes. I think it's both an accurate analysis of how the word is used in the song.
I also just want to say, like, before he starts singing, I really like how it kind of has this ghostly synth that we connect to blurry face, and then it sounds like it's being smacked by the drums, which I just thought was great.
Yeah, it's the droning intro. I think droning like noises, I think is like the hallmark of Blurry Face. I think for each album they have a sort of like particular sound style that they're going for, and Blurry Face is these sort of droning background noises.
Yeah,
at least
for sure.
That's what I gather. That I can think of, like they do that in Fairly Local and Message Man. So, and
yeah,
of course
I
Polarize.
think it is very common. I feel like it's similar to the Colors, where they're kind of distinguishing the albums with very distinct characteristics.
Yeah.
The next thing I noted was "Help Me Down." I wasn't sure in what context this was discussing, but I said like potentially it's off a ledge, like literally, or it could also be doubt and more like abstract of anything.
I think if you read the end of that lyric and then the beginning of the next lyric, it says, "Help me down those stairs."
That's true too. It could just be continuation.
It might be. I think this is something that that Tyler does a lot, and it really throws me off. Is I think he ends one lyric and then connects it immediately to the front of another lyric, and then he uses that front to start a completely different lyric. So he sort of doubles up, uses a few words for both purposes.
Yeah. I like too how there's that pause, so it's kind of like it could be a continuation, but there's also the ambiguity there, so it's kind of a double meaning. I feel like he's done that in a couple songs.
Yeah, I can't really name any others off the top of my head, but when I think about it, I'm like, yeah, that's definitely happened more than once, I would say.
Were you going to add something?
I thought stairs were interesting. Like those stairs is where I'll be hiding all my problems. Hiding problems, like hiding anything really in stairs is something that seems very strange to me. And so I was trying to figure out like what's significant about stairs. And I might be completely off base and inserting false meaning, but what I thought of was that stairs are a sort of like transitory place between two levels, or a transitory space between two places. So when you're on a staircase, you're not really on the first floor and you're not really on the second floor. You're sort of in between.
That's
and I jumped to the does that connect with being like a lukewarm Christian? You're not one place or another. You're sort of caught in between.
Or even like between Earth and eternity as well.
Yeah, so it's sort of like not a purgatory for the soul, or like a purgatory for the mind, like you say you're a Christian, but you might be living in sin, so you're sort of living a double life, being lukewarm, as Jesus described.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could see that. I also noted that, like, maybe this could be a contrast to, like, what we think of as a stairway to heaven, except it's like, help me as I'm going down those stairs the opposite way, and kind of showing that maybe he needs this aid and redirection from God as he could be going down, but simultaneously desiring God's help at the same time, which I think kind of emphasizes the spiritual warfare we do see throughout the song.
That's interesting. Trying to puzzle that out.
Like saying, help me down those stairs. It's like I'm going down, but also like help me, which I feel like is an interesting tension.
Yeah, and I think, well, the leading lyric, "Help me polarize," I think he's asking God for help, like help me, like push my way out of, the middle of being like lukewarm or in this sort of purgatory space between spaces into either, down here on earth or up in heaven with you. Because you don't really, I mean, we as Christians don't believe purgatory exists, so you need to you need to either be in one or the other. So I just gonna go out and say it, that I generally sort of characterized, or sort of all my notes sort of fall into this pattern of analysis that says that this song is, I think, a character analysis of the disciple Peter. That's like the direction that I went with it. And so I thought of, my friends and I, we got a lot of problems, is sort of referring to, just people in general, like the world, but it could also be, his fellow disciples.
Yeah, that's a good point. I do think it's interesting, though. I feel like in at least Ode to Sleep, if not maybe a couple other songs, he does seem to draw parallels between himself and Peter a lot.
I gotta say, a lot of, I think, guys in general relate to Peter, the sort of rash character, foot and mouth, go-getter type. I think a lot of people can relate with.
Yeah, I think a lot of people in general too can, for sure. Any other thoughts for the chorus, or do you want to move on to verse 1?
No, I think that pretty much covers everything that I got.
Okay. So verse 1, he says, "You know where I'm coming from. Though I am running to you, all I feel is deny, deny, denial." This I just noted as kind of similar to what I said before, but this simultaneous repentance happening at the same time as sin is happening with his denial. And I don't know why, but I thought of this image of how it kind of feels like when you put two ends, like two of the same magnet end together, and like you can get them close, but they're never gonna come together in the way that he's trying to polarize like the good in himself from the bad.
Yeah, I think that's a very accurate sort of analogy and analysis. Sort of, you really want to cling to God because you know that he's good. You've grown up your entire life knowing that he's good, and the things of God are good, and he's got your future in his hands, and you can trust that that's safe. But at the same time, we struggle for control, and we struggle to do it our way, and sometimes it's just not convenient to say that you're a Christian, so you push away from that.
Or it's really scary to say you're one.
Yeah, it's either out of fear or, vying for position or status. I do think that this might just be a musical thing. I don't really understand the back end of music very much. But I think saying deny, deny, denial, saying that like 3 times, the word deny 3 times, I think fits into the idea that this is Peter who said, I will die for you, Lord. He said that in the upper room. I will not betray you. I would die for you. And then he turns around a couple days later or the next day, and when it really counts, he denies Jesus 3 times.
Yeah, I really like that parallel. I think it's very prominent. Did you have any other thoughts on the pre-chorus? It's pretty
Um,
straightforward.
I yeah, pretty straightforward, and I that's pretty much all of my notes.
Okay. Um, I definitely meant verse 1 because that was not the pre-chorus. But we're going into the pre-chorus. So this is when he says, I wanted to be a better brother, better son, wanted to be a better adversary to the evil I have done. I have none to show to the one I love, but deny, deny, denial. Any initial thoughts?
Other than, man, do I relate to that sometimes.
Sure.
I think generally this song sort of captures what Peter and the other disciples were going through before, during, and immediately after Jesus' crucifixion, before his resurrection. So this is sort of that sort of snapshot. And I think after Jesus died, Peter and all the other disciples felt this sort of overwhelming doubt and fear that everything that they'd done with Jesus for the last few years was all for nothing. They thought Jesus was going to come and, free the Jews from the Romans like a conqueror, but he died like a criminal. And so all their confidence was sort of out the window, and they felt a lot of regret, especially Peter, because in the moment that it truly counted, he denied Jesus. And his last time he might have seen Jesus was him passing him by after the rooster crowed.
Yeah.
Imagine the regret.
Yeah.
And so I think this part of the song captures the feelings of regret. Like, I could have been better to my brothers. I could have been a better son to the king. But I have none to show to the one I love, but denial.
Yeah. I also noted certain characteristics of what it means to be a brother and what it means to be a son. I thought of my brother and how a lot of it has to do with being caring and being protective. And as a son, maybe he felt he could have been more honoring or obedient to wisdom. I don't know if you had any other thoughts on what it means to be a brother or a son.
No, I'm the oldest of 4, so I have this sort of, I guess, duty sort of imposed on me by culture and my family and I guess myself, that I need to be a good example, and I need to be the rock of all the kids.
Yeah.
I need to be the person that you can come to my siblings can come to depend on when it really counts. And I've always I say to myself often that I could be a better brother. I could have been better for my oldest brother when he really needed it, but I felt like I wasn't there. Or I had quote unquote better things to do, and I always have pangs of regret when I really start to think about it, because I feel in a way that I've failed as a brother.
I'm sure that's a very common oldest sibling experience. I am
Yeah.
the youngest of 4, so we have very different outlooks.
Yeah. When it comes to being a better son, I think it's the same sort of, I could have, just done better. I could have listened to my parents' sound reasoning before trouble struck, but I decided to, no, I'll figure it out. I'll do it my own way. And then, tragedy strikes, and I'm like, oh, all that wisdom that I ignored, that's not great.
Yeah. Sometimes we
So-
learn the most in hindsight, too, unfortunately.
Yeah, so if I'd, been a better son, I might have been able to avoid unnecessary pain.
And I think also just on top, of course, how we always feel like we could have done better to reflect the image of God, too.
Yeah. I definitely don't consider myself a, paragon of Christian virtue. I say things I don't mean. I lie. I really have to work on that in that regard. Because I don't know if we're called to be exemplars of Christ and his character, and, to be set apart by our actions and our attitudes. And I don't think I really am. just generally.
Yeah.
I think
That's the
I don't do
tension
it.
too, though. Of like, we will always have sins and imperfections until we die, and so we all have this like polarized tension until eternity.
Yeah, trying to push to the extremes.
Yeah, for sure. So my next note I have for adversary, and what it looks like to be a better adversary. It's the evil. Um, I just wrote, like, being more knowledgeable of Scripture. I think sometimes, especially when we're in drier spiritual seasons or we're in pits spiritually, it's good to have, like, Scripture in our back pocket. And I know for myself, like, I've definitely had times where I'm struggling and I'm like, man, like, I wish I had really, like, memorized more Scripture for moments like this. As well as, like, taking thoughts captive, as Scripture talks about, or like being more shrewd. And for this specifically, I also wanted to read Matthew 10:16, which is about shrewdness. It says, "Behold, I am sending you out as sheep in the midst of wolves, so be wise as serpents," which I think is also shrewd, "and innocent as doves." Just some of the characteristics that we're to strive for, but that we can struggle to emulate.
I think, yeah, most people don't really think that they've done enough to sort of combat the evil or the sin in their lives.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a common feeling that you didn't, do enough when things went wrong, or they could have not gone wrong in the first place had I just made better choices.
Yeah. And then the last thing I said was with I have none to show to the one I love, with denial. Just kind of how, as humans, we're pretty consistent in being good at doubting and being good at selfishness.
Yeah, that's
And this is where I also connected to, like, how we all have that fear, like Peter, when we have doubt and our other human qualities.
yeah. I'm just curious. Did you draw any parallels to Peter in particular? I don't remember if you said you did earlier,
I
or
think
if
this is the first point where I did, which is wild because there
okay.
definitely are parallels throughout.
Yeah, I don't. Sometimes when I was writing these notes yesterday, I kind of almost felt like I was shoehorning that in. I can't tell if that's actually like, if my comparisons are valid or if, there's actually some connection.
I mean, I feel like if you found a connection, I feel like that makes it valid. Because, again, like, we're just analyzing through a Christian perspective rather than, like, saying this is all that the songs are or something.
That's true. Like like, I don't know what, Tyler's motivation or, what his thought process behind a song is, but I'm not going to claim to have secret knowledge about that, the
Yeah,
inner workings.
of course. But I think, like, something that's cool about our analysis and the podcast as a whole is, like, for me anyway, like, a big reason I love creating these is to show that, like, this can be another spiritual tool that you can use to both meditate on and combat spiritual warfare.
Yeah, I will say I am not in my Bible as much as I need to be, like hardly at all. And this doing research for this was the first time I really like sat down and was like parsing through the book of Psalms and like some of the New Testament, because I think Blurry Face in general has a lot of parallels to the book of Psalms where David is lamenting about his rights and his wrongs, like,
Mm-hmm.
God, I want you to see me, I want you to know me, why are you leaving me in this desolate place?
Yeah. Did you have any psalms in particular you wanted to connect to this?
I just had one that I managed to quote, and it was earlier in the song. It was just, background evidence for the lyric, you know where I'm coming from. And it was Psalm 139:1 that says, "Oh Lord, you have searched me and you know me." So we
Mm-hmm.
have evidence that God knows us at all times, and despite that, we still make the choices that we make.
Which he also knows.
Yeah. So you're in checkmate either way.
Yeah. And then I don't have anything else for this part, unless you did.
No, nothing else really.
Okay, so moving into verse 2, he says, polarize is taking your disguises, separating them, splitting them up from wrong and right. It's deciding where to die and deciding where to fight. Deny, deny, denial. The rhythm here is just like, it's hard to just speak it because it's just such a
I
good
know.
flow.
It's so. I know. I'm glad that I'm not reading the lyrics because I feel like I would just burst into trying to match it to the rhythm.
I never want to embarrass myself, so. But also just like I don't know, it's kind of a fun way to like not only just sing them, but like speak them as if they're poems too.
Yeah.
So I actually have 3 verses I wanted to read in terms of like what disguises could possibly be. In my case, all 3 refer to the devil, actually. So I think it's also important because at my church, we just had a sermon this past week that was on the devil and like the devil's schemes and how at his core he seeks to deceive and divide people. And so I just thought it was worth noting, like, as we're talking about disguises, people might not always realize like the different ways that Satan can disguise himself. So I thought either way it would be useful to talk about. So the first verse I have is 2 Corinthians 11:14. So 2 Corinthians 11:14 says, and no wonder, for Satan himself keeps disguising himself as an angel of light, which kind of shows that he can look similar to God, and yet he's not, and he's very much different. And then the second one I have is 1 Peter 5:8. This one says, keep your senses, be watchful. Your adversary, the devil, walks about like a roaring lion, seeking to devour someone. And God also has parallels in Scripture to being a lion. So once again, like, he can kind of disguise himself to look similarly, but he's not. And then the final one I have is Revelation 12:9. And this one says, so down the great dragon was hurled, the original serpent, the one called Devil and Satan, who is misleading the entire inhabited earth. He was hurled down to the earth, and his angels were hurled down with him, which also proves that he was convincing enough to get some of the angels on his side. Yeah. Going back to the verse, polarize is taking your disguises. So in my analysis, I guess I took your disguises as referring to blurry face or Satan, and then separating them, splitting them up from wrong and right. And kind of distinguishing like what's truth versus what is a lie that kind of looked like truth but got twisted a little bit, so it's not true. So those are my initial thoughts. I'm sure you probably had very different thoughts.
Yeah, I thought the first 2 lines, polarize is taking your disguises, separating them, splitting them up from wrong and right. That's a very in sort of a way that matches the definition of the term polarize. Mm-hmm. You're taking your these disguises and you're separating them into wrong or right, but I don't know, I'm sort of puzzled by the idea of disguises. Like, what is a right disguise? Like, is there like a white lie that I can put on that?
That's a good point.
Is there any sort of good disguise? Because disguises generally sort of like the first things that I think of is you're trying to cover up that you did something wrong. Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking of some kind of context where you can have a good disguise, and I was drawing a blank on that.
Maybe also like the idea that disguise is just trying not to look like yourself. I don't know if that's much more positive though. But
yeah, if you're trying to put on this sort of facade of being a good person, because I think that's something that Christians struggle with, is they try to act good instead of being good. They'll say they believe in God, they'll go to church, they'll go through the motions, but inside their heart isn't changing. Mm-hmm. And that's the sort of disguise that a lot of Christians wear, unfortunately, at church every week.
I mean, it kind of goes back to you started talking about lukewarm Christians.
Yeah. So we need to differentiate ourselves, our actions, not our words, and sort of take off the disguise, because the disguise is, the words that we say. Oh yeah, I do this, yada yada yada. I read my Bible every day. I pray. I go to church. I take communion. My kids do their studies as well, and those are all good things. But if you're using that to sort of cover up like an internal inadequacy in your heart, then it's just a disguise. You're using it to compensate for something that you're lacking.
Yeah, which is also like a good way to point out, like, don't be hypocritical in your beliefs.
Yeah, and that's something that I've struggled with. I try to align, or I try to, what I believe and what I do are sort of aligned. And right now I'm in a space where I haven't properly polarized. I haven't separated them properly, action from belief.
I think it's also different too, and it's like you are aware and desirous of the direction you're supposed to be going versus like if you're just doing things for how it looks to other people.
Yeah.
Because we all go through seasons where like maybe our spiritual habits aren't ideal or where we would want them to be, and that's part of being human as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. I thought that I have a note for this verse, sort of relating back to the Peter and his journey. Peter knew the difference between right and wrong. He spent like 3 years with Jesus. Like, if you don't spend 3 years with Jesus and start to understand the difference between right and wrong, I don't know what to tell you, buddy.
Yeah.
So he had no excuses to not make the choices that he made.
Have you heard...
Polarize his beliefs.
Sorry, this is random. Have you heard that? I think it's an NF song that's like, I got no excuses.
I honestly, my like listening base of NF, shallow and spread out. I haven't really dug into it.
I don't know like a lot of his music either, but that one just came to mind. Anyway.
So Peter doesn't really have any excuses for his actions. He knows the difference between right and wrong. He knows how to separate them and split them up, and he's shown multiple times in the Gospels as doesn't really know how to decide where to fight and where to die. He cuts off a servant's ear. He rebukes Jesus for not being this sort of conqueror hero character. Mm-hmm. And so he takes a stand, but at the wrong time. Or I don't want to say wrong, because it all served a sort of greater purpose in the biblical story, but in the moment, like it might have been like looking at it as an objective observer, it might be like, yeah, that's not a great choice, buddy. And then, the opportunities where he could really stand up to sort of, save Jesus from execution, he's just sitting around a fire trying to hide himself and denying Jesus 3 times. So...
Yes. At the same time, wasn't Peter the one when Jesus resurrected who felt the holes in his hands?
I think, wasn't that Thomas? Doubting Thomas? I thought so.
Okay.
I mean, maybe they all got a turn too. It's like, yep, those are, those are nail holes. But
I'm looking this up just.
I thought the illustration was. Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong since you're Googling it, but from what I remember, Jesus appeared to the disciples who were in the upper room, and Thomas was like, that's not Jesus, that can't be real. And so I think Thomas was the first one to touch the nail holes.
It's really funny that maybe they all got it. I was just curious though, like, do you remember what, like, was the denial the last time we saw Peter, or was there anything after that?
No, there was... I think in Matthew 26, chapter 26 is when, after Jesus is resurrected, he appears to Peter and the other disciples who are fishing. This is after. Okay. So after Jesus was crucified, they sort of, left town, went back to being fishermen, like nothing had ever happened. And then Jesus appears to them. I think that's the when the day that they didn't never managed to catch any fish, and then Jesus cast their net over the other side and they brought in like 130 fish. I think that's when that story takes place, is after his resurrection.
Okay.
And I think that's when, I don't remember what it was called, but that's when Jesus sort of like reinstates Peter as a shepherd of the flock, because, you know, he denied Jesus 3 times and then ran away. So Jesus came back and was like, you're still fine, you're good, just don't mess it up again.
Yeah.
It was like the reconsecration, or like the reapostling. I don't know the word that they used.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. I appreciate all the Peter knowledge that you have brought.
I've never had so much Peter knowledge in my head than before now.
Just all the I know everything about Peter. And then I just noted with the refrain, it's just the da-da-da-da's, and repeating we have problems. And I think I like that whenever they have us like singing something simple together in a song, it's always just like bringing this common ground of we are all consistent in our imperfection in this case.
Yeah. We all share this sort of fundamental inadequacy, and it's nothing to be ashamed of, but it's nothing to praise either. So acknowledging that you have these problems is the first step to fixing them.
Yeah, for sure. Which a hypocrite probably would not do.
Yeah, so you have to, you can't sort of live a double life. You can't confront, oh, why are my actions and my beliefs not lining up, if you first, don't acknowledge that you're making a mistake, or that that's an issue.
So then we move into the bridge, and this is when he gets his Spanish out. He says, Domingo en fuego, I think I lost my halo. I don't know where you are, you'll have to come and find me. And then he repeats that. So for those who don't know, Domingo en fuego means Sunday on fire. And I just wrote next to this, in contrast to like Holy Sunday, this is an instance where it's not holy or sacred. Maybe it was even possibly used for sin, and that's why he's saying this. Which also
interesting
would kind of make sense if you think about the next line, if I lost my halo.
Yeah.
And then I added with I lost my halo, I just said kind of what I talked about when I was discussing doubt with Luke. Just this doubt in his redemption security, and possibly like shame from sin that makes him feel like he's too far gone from God to be redeemed.
Yeah, I think that fear that you're not really saved is very, it's a perpetual thing that a lot of people deal with. And it's a problem that we all kind of share. I mean, no matter how solid a foundation that your faith can be based on, sometimes you just have these doubts. Yeah. Sometimes you think you lose your halo and you can't find it.
For sure. And then I also said, as he says, I don't know where you are, you'll have to come and find me. I think this is another tension of like asking God because he's not necessarily looking for him, or maybe he doesn't even want to see him because of this lower place that he's sitting in spiritually. And then as he screams it the second time he says it, and I think this kind of shows the tension of like, I'm here in this place, but I'm also desperate to get out of it and for you to help me. And I feel like that even goes back to like the very first song, Implicit Demand for Proof, in their discography, and how a lot of times when there's screaming, it's really wanting God to pay attention.
Yeah. Trying to, loud noises will definitely make the God of the universe pay more attention to me.
As if you didn't already hear, yeah.
Yeah, but it's just that releasing all that anger, because a lot of times, when people think that God isn't listening to them or paying attention to them, we get angry because we've staked our lives and our sort of confidence in, the presence of God, and when we feel that he's not with us, then what have we built our lives on? Like, this foundation that I thought was steady doesn't feel steady anymore, and that makes people angry.
For sure.
Although I don't really know if Tyler screams are out of anger, because not every scream is out of anger, so maybe
Yeah.
it's more just
Sometimes
a
it's just,
desperate
like,
plea.
emphasis too.
I think in particular this verse, or the bridge rather, is, I mean, it's a pretty clear, at least to me, and I've been riding the Peter train so far, a pretty clear timeline, I would say, of, Domingo en Fuego, Sunday on fire, Jesus was crucified. No, it was Sunday is the day that we, take to worship God, and, it's sort of before Jesus' crucifixion, man and God were separated in a very fundamental way. We couldn't, culture and, religion dictated that you can't really speak directly to God.
Yes.
And Jesus' crucifixion tore that, broke down that separation. The temple curtain was torn from top down. God was ready to listen to his people. And I think that his crucifixion, in a way, burned it all down. All that religion that previously gummed up the works that allowed people to talk with God, where it was all burned down. All that old tradition, all those old rules that we used to have to follow with offerings and cleanliness is all gone. We don't really have to follow those anymore. It was all burned down to the ground, back to the very fundamental core of what it's supposed to be about, and that's connection with God. I might be leaning too much into the fire.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Did you have any other thoughts on the song lyrically or musically, or?
Yeah, I think I did actually want to correct myself. I quoted the wrong reference earlier. When I was talking about Jesus appearing to Peter and the fishermen, I meant to say John 21, not Matthew 26. I read the wrong note.
Okay.
So Matthew 26 was when Peter said, "I will not deny you," in the upper room, while John 21 is when Jesus appeared to them on the shore. I think I lost my halo. I thought that generally that just who, after Jesus died, the guy, the Son of God that made us special, we followed him, we gave up our livelihoods, to go follow this guy, and he's gone now, so we just go back to our normal lives. I think I lost this thing that sort of separated me from everybody else.
Yeah, I can't imagine, being one of those people in the 3 days in between.
Yeah, I think it's a period of time that I don't know much about, because, there's, when you're learning about, especially when you're younger, when you learn about the crucifixion and the resurrection, you typically just skip immediately to the resurrection, because 3 days pass, but we don't really know, or it's not really taught what happens on those 3 days, aside from the women visiting the tomb to, properly bury Jesus. But I did reading on, what the disciples did, and they basically just scattered into the wind. They left. They went back to their old lives, and they just doubted, because, they thought Jesus would be this conqueror to come and save the Jews, but he didn't, and so they just, went back to what they did before. And so
it's interesting that happened so swiftly.
Yeah, you'd think, especially from Peter, who said, "I will not deny you, I would die for you," just goes back to fishing a day later. And so I don't know where you are.
I think also
Sorry,
that
you can go.
emphasizes how, again, people in the Bible are not superhuman or above any of us.
Yeah, the Bible is stories of regular people doing amazing things. There's nothing really particular that makes them special. It's just the God that they have faith in does very important and powerful things through them. It's not through their own actions that, anything wonderful happens. It's God who they place their sole faith in, who works through them. For the lyric, "I don't know where you are," I think that just sort of connects back to that profound doubt that the 12 were feeling. Where did you go? You died. You said you were supposed to come back. Where? And then, "You'll have to come and find me," because they're clearly not chomping at the bit to go back to what they were doing with Jesus. They're not, until Jesus was resurrected and his ascension, they weren't really going to spread out over all the earth and keep preaching. Jesus had to come and tell them, "Hey, we're still in business."
Yeah.
So Jesus had to come to them in John 21 in order for their, their ministry to continue.
Yeah, it's important to remember, for sure, because I feel like sometimes it can be easy to be extra hard on yourself when you doubt in things, and to just see that thread through history, that's always been a human struggle, is very helpful.
Yeah, I struggle with doubt a lot, or lacking self-confidence in especially my creative work. I do some writing and drawing, and a lot of times I'm like, what am I doing? This is junk. Why am I spending my time making something that nobody's going to appreciate? And I need to...
It's a very artist narrative to have, like imposter syndrome.
Yeah, and I think doubt and feeling like you're an imposter are very, linked together, because people feel they're an imposter, so they doubt their work, or they doubt their work, so they feel they're an imposter because all these other people have total confidence in what they're doing at all times. So I'm told, like, that's a sort of false image we have of people. And like you mentioned, in the Bible, these aren't perfect people, but we sometimes put them on this pedestal.
Just because they're in, like, God's word.
Yeah.
The last thing I noted about this song is there's this organ at the end, and I like how it provides this ambiguity. Are these like church sounds, or is this more like gloomy funeral sounds? And it kind of oscillates between the two.
Yeah, I can't really place the particular sound I think you're talking about, because I should have listened to this more. I think I just listened to it a couple times, taking notes, but not immediately before this.
It's after, like, all the lyrics fade away, and it's just the last little part before the song ends.
Oh, yeah. I know, yeah. Now I know what you're talking about. And also just the general echo. Lyrics, like, you're in a big space. And churches typically are these big sort of open spaces where both worship and funerals happen. So that connects back to that analogy you were making.
Yeah. Why did you want to join Polarize specifically? What do you like about this song? I think
it's just there's a lot of meaning packed into this song. I really sank my teeth into this one, not knocking the lyrical complexity of Doubt, but Doubt is a much more straightforward and simple song. It's less ambiguous about what it's trying to get across. And so, I didn't really have to take very many notes on Doubt to sort of understand what was going on. But for this, I really had to, like, sink my teeth into it. And so it was, kind of a challenge. And, I think it's one of the songs that I enjoy more on this album anyway.
I do. I like how you brought up that analysis comparison, because I feel like I like how Doubt is kind of that more, like, tip of the iceberg, and then it goes into Polarize, which kind of sinks deeper into a similar concept, but more on a spiritual warfare level.
Yeah. You just reading the lyrics for Doubt, it's fairly simple. I don't want to... That almost seems mean to say, like, nothing really simple about trying to encapsulate these emotions in song form, but in comparison to Polarize, where I had to really dig in and be like, okay, what's the definition of this word? What does this mean in the context of the previous lyric and the next lyric? And that's not really something that Tyler really uses in Doubt. It's more just a linear list of things.
For sure.
Like, scared of my own immaturity, scared of my own feelings, scared of uncertainty, I might die. Like that's just a bulleted list more than
it's kind of all just short statements rather than, like, a narrative with multiple layers, like you were saying.
Yeah. So I guess the deeper meaning and the complexity, I think, is what really attracted me to the song. That you can even really pick up on while you're listening to it. You don't even really have to go really dig into it to be like, oh, there's something going on here that I want to know more about.
Which is also a cool part, like when you're singing it, you can also feel that spiritual tone as well. Any last thoughts? Or, like, anything creatively you want to plug for yourself? Feel free.
Creatively? Any last thoughts when it comes to the song? I think crowing noise that plays during which I'm pretty sure is Tyler Joseph trying to make chicken noises, which is a really funny picture in my head of Tyler Joseph in a sound booth squawking like a chicken. I'm fairly certain.
I need to re-listen because I don't remember that.
So yeah, there's this like crowing noise or like squawking or like rooster crowing sound that plays during the Domingo and Fuego, and I think that was really one of like the cornerstones that I built my sort of, you know, this is sort of a character analysis of Peter, because you have denial is listed three times in sets of three,
Mm-hmm.
and there's the crowing after all the denials took place. I
That's
don't
true.
think
It's like the full narrative.
when the crowing, yeah, when the crowing starts, he doesn't talk about denial anymore because it's already happened.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that was just something, and it always sticks out. It's so weird when you listen to it. I remember I listened to the song with my mom, and she was like, "Wait, is that a chicken?" And I was like, "I guess I don't know what else it's supposed to be."
Wild.
So, creative plug. I mean, I'm trying to write a book. I'm gonna see if that goes anywhere. Maybe.
Nice. That's exciting. So stay tuned for when Caleb writes a book.
We'll see if it happens.
If it does, I'll plug it.
Oh, thank you. I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you so much for joining me today. This was a great analysis.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this. I asked to join this last May, I think. Let me double check.
Caleb's been very
It's been a while.
patient. So thank you, Caleb, for all of your patience.
Yeah,
I
it was.
I think it's fun to do them in real time instead of like a bunch of pre-recording, because then you can also like kind of have a snapshot of like where the fandom's at the same time, which nothing's really happening right now, but oh well, that's ironic.
Yeah, every time I have this album, or I have this song downloaded on my phone, and so every time it came on, I was like, oh, yep, still waiting for Polarize to happen eventually. And I knew when I was getting into it that it was going to be a long wait, because I saw your sort of your upload schedule, and going through their discography in order. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm pretty far
And then
down the list.
I started adding the music videos in as well.
Yeah.
But I really enjoy it though too, because it's like I get to like give everyone this comprehensive thing that they're gonna be able to have whenever they want.
Yeah, and doing it in reverse order means that whenever new music is released, you can just tack it onto the end. Like,
Exactly.
yeah, we're doing it in reverse.
I decided, I was like, no matter how long the band goes, I will go. So
Yeah.
like
So
at
hopefully
some point it would probably be on pause, but
Yeah,
if
hopefully
they're-
they give
if
you
they're
plenty
still
more
kicking,
episodes.
I will keep going.
Thanks. I'm really glad I finally got to do this. Every time I listened to their music, it was sort of a glimmer of hope that I might be able to come on here and talk about this band that I know it's sort of like very edgy, and like to say, yeah, 21 Pilots is the deepest band, but to a certain extent, I don't think that's inaccurate.
Yeah, especially compared to like most pop music.
Yeah, a lot of people, I think 21 Pilots fans, especially when they're younger, like junior high, high school years, they're like get made fun of for like, oh, you think they're so deep or whatever. And then I'm
And
like
then
over
you're
here like,
have you heard the songs though?
have you listened to the music?
Yeah. But yeah, so any last parting words for the fandom, or
Just
see you later?
keep hoping that more music is coming out.
Yeah.
Keeping on, I guess.
Well, thank you again for coming on and joining Polarize. So I want to hear from you. You can email EnTrenchPodcast@gmail.com with a written account of your 21 Pilots story or your favorite memories you have related to the band. You can also reach out with an episode request if you want to analyze a song, video, or album with me. And if you would like to contribute to the analysis we've already covered, you can send an email or message me on Instagram at EnTrench_pod. You can find EnTrench on Podbean, Verbal, Spotify, Apple Music, and Amazon Music. I look forward to hearing from you. Tune in next time for We Don't Believe What's on TV. It's like their longest song title ever. Thank you so much for listening, friends. Stay alive and remember, EnTrench, you're not alone.